So today's assignment is to think about who your all-time favorite villain is. What makes this person the greatest bad guy of all time? Does your villain live by a certain moral code? What is it? What are their rules or codes? Even the worst bad guys have a moral code. This is the way they act. These are the rules they live by, even if their moral code is kind of twisted. So using the same guidelines as you did for yourself, do you share any common values, rules, codes, or traits with some of these bad guys? Be honest. So what I have done is provided you a PowerPoint that goes over some of the baddest of bad villains of all times. When I was making this, I thought of, the typical super villain in Marvel and DC, but then I also got to thinking about some of the literature you've read over the last 4 years and some of the villains we've read in class. And then I was thinking about some historical villains as well. You may be familiar with some of these villains and you may not, but take the time to read through the PowerPoint, because even if you have never heard of one of these villains, as you read, you may realize that you share some characteristics, or you empathize with some of their motivations, or simply that you are intrigued and want to learn more about this villain. Once you go through the PowerPoint, you're going to complete the attached graphic organizer. But I'm just going to go through a couple of these to get your juices flowing, and then I'm going to allow you to go through the rest of this PowerPoint on your own. So first, these are not in order of worst villain to not so worst villain. These are in no particular order. However, I would say, in my personal opinion, that Darth Vader is the all-time #1 worst villain. Darth Vader is intriguing. People love to watch him. One little boy said that he loved Darth Vader because he gets everything that he wants. He wants what he wants and he takes it. He shows up like a leader. So you may not agree with that, but again, Darth Vader is probably one of the baddest of bads. Next, you may not know this character, but his name is Hannibal Lecter, and he was the bad guy in The Silence of the Lambs. This movie, if you have never seen this movie, is an all-time favorite. It's twisted, it's psychologically scary. This man preys on his victims, not necessarily through direct violence or control of the force like Darth Vader, but Hannibal Lecter gets into the minds of his victims. And then he ends up eating them. So, and you almost feel bad for him, and you almost want to hear more. He's a brilliant man, and he's very well spoken, and he's very mesmerizing, which is what makes him a supervillain. Okay, Vlad the Impaler. Vlad the Impaler is a historical figure, and he was this leader, okay? And what he did was he killed tens of thousands of people. And what he did was he took their heads, he chopped their heads off, and he impaled them on posts. And he put the heads of all of his victims all around his land and his property and his empire to scare off enemies or invading forces. But the thing is, he killed a lot of people, not just his enemies. So you just imagine coming onto this empire and seeing 20,000 heads on sticks. Vlad the Impaler was such a villain that the character Dracula was inspired by him. So again, the inspiration for writing Dracula was Vlad the Impaler, super villain. Killmonger. Killmonger is tough. I was on the fence between if he was a villain or an anti-hero. Now, a villain is a bad guy. And an anti-hero is, well, a good guy who does bad things. So it's up to you to decide here. Killmonger's past was awful. And so his motivation for what he does comes from a place of pain and hurt. He wants people to know that he and his people, his Black people, have been oppressed, and that his cause is urgent. It is so important for the future. But unfortunately, he is evil. What he does is awful. So for that reason, he is a bad guy. But he's very relatable because he is trying to change the evil in the world. But unfortunately, he himself, as a result of his past, is also evil. Okay, Regina George from the movie Mean Girls. She's the ultimate bully. She's simply the worst. And I feel like everybody knows a Regina George in their life and in high school. The bully that in 20 years still haunts you. Don't be the bully. Don't be the Regina George of high school. The Joker. I would say that the Joker is probably the number 2 bad guy. He's like really bad. The problem with the Joker is figuring out his moral code and the code that he lives by. Because depending on which version of the Joker you decide to analyze, his motivation oftentimes does not make sense. And he probably does not seem to have much of a code, except for to mess with people and for sheer entertainment. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was a serial killer in London at the turn of the century. He's very fascinating. He's very intelligent. And they never actually found him, from what I believe. But what they did find out was that he was very smart and that he probably was either a doctor or somebody in the medical field because of the way he executed his killings. Bigger Thomas in Native Son. Bigger Thomas is a lot like Killmonger, where he may be a villain and he may be an anti-hero. The thing is that Bigger Thomas doesn't do anything heroic. And the reason why I say that I am on the fence between if he's a villain or anti-hero is because his behaviors are the result of a societal attack. He is so afraid of white people that he does villainous things. And he wants to live by a moral code, but is unable to follow through with it because of this fear society has instilled in him. Abigail Williams from The Crucible. Again, Abigail Williams' motivation for what she does is relatable. She is certainly a villain, but she grew up without parents. The man she fell in love with as a child led her on. Is she a villain? Yes. But is her motivation for the things that she does completely clear? Or is she the only one to blame? I don't know. But she does tell lies and she manipulates everybody and she doesn't change a situation that she caused. Thus, she is certainly a villain. The Kid. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this book from when you were a child, but the book is about this kid who wants an apple, and it's called The Giving Tree. And the Giving Tree grows up with the kid. So the Giving Tree gives him an apple, it gives him more apples, and then he gives him a leaf, and the kid takes and takes and takes. And then he gets older and he takes the tree's wood until the very end of the book where the tree is nothing and the kid is done. At no point does he ever give back to the tree. So this kid is a villain because he does not ever give back. He just takes and takes and takes, making him the worst. Okay, so you're going to go through the rest of this PowerPoint. Again, read the characteristics of each villain. You are not limited to these villains, but I thought that this PowerPoint would help you kind of get your juices flowing to begin this assignment. Again, use one of these characters and continue your research. Or if you had a villain in mind that is not on this PowerPoint, feel free to go off in your own direction.